with roll call.
Jeremy Lukirko, City of Walnut Creek and Transpac rep.
John Cunningham, Contra Costa County.
Barbara Hawkins, City of San Pablo.
Yvette Ortiz, City of El Cerrito and WICTAC.
Tom Horaeus, Tri-Delta Transit.
Michael Tanner, BART.
Lynn Filson, City of Antioch and Transplan rep.
Steve Kersavan, City of Brentwood.
Jerry Fay, Contra Costa County.
Heather Ballinger, City of Walnut Creek and City County Engineers rep.
Tony Coe, Lafayette, SWAT.
Did we want CCTA staff?
Matt Kelly, CCTA staff. Brad Beck, CCTA staff. Walt Allen, Parsons, Sylvia.
All right, thank you. We're now moving on to item B, public comment. Are there members of the public who want to speak on items that are not on the agenda? All right, seeing no members of the public, we'll move on to item C, which is election of chair. This is your addendum, the agenda addendum. So we're moving on to an item I'm very excited about. Election of chair. I've enjoyed my stay here. Election of chair and vice chair. And so I think we take nominations, or how does that work? Yes. Okay. Can I nominate somebody, or?
Well, I would guess we usually do the rotation, so
Okay.
I would nominate Tom Horaeus as the chair. Do you happen to know who's next? I don't really like him. Well, you know what? I'm going to nominate Jerry Fay for vice chair anyway.
Go for John.
Okay. Do I have any seconds on that?
Second.
Okay. So, is it clear? Okay. So the motion is for Tom Harris. Sorry about that. To be the chair, and vice chair is Jerry Fay. And we have a second on that. So all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I'm now going to hand it over to Tom. Thank you. Yes, go for it. Get it off. Get it off.
Thanks. I really feel important. Okay, we can just move straight on then. Consent calendar. Anyone have a motion?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
No discussion? Done. Project monitoring. How come I don't have a staff name on these?
Stephanie, yeah, it's me right here.
Stephanie, it is you. Thank you.
Hi. Good morning, committee members. Including your packets are the monthly monitoring reports for this month. They're on page 3-3 to 3-9. We monitor the STIP and OBAG projects as well as FHWA inactive projects. On page 3-6, those are the current fiscal year 15-16's OBAG projects. There are 15 of them totaling $18 million. And just a reminder that these projects have a E76 deadline of November 1st, which is less than 5 months away. So just another reminder. And lastly, we received notification from MTC this week that the last chance to move these projects to the next fiscal year of 16-17 would be July 15th. So in the coming weeks, in addition to asking for the regular updates monthly, we will also be talking to other project sponsors to make sure they can meet the November 1st deadline. And if not, we would recommend you to move your projects to the next fiscal year to prevent losing the funds. So that will be happening in the next couple of weeks, in addition to the monthly monitoring updates that we asked for. And there's questions, I'm happy to take them.
So Stephanie, not to put you on the spot, but we were just at City County And Ross mentioned that the federal highway program is
Yeah.
expired and about to run out of money, and that could affect OBAG projects and others. So would that be these projects that are already have their E76 and are in construction, or maybe,
Well,
or is it everything?
everything. Well, I think the projects we're monitoring right now, they're not in construction yet. They're applying for the funds. Okay. So you're a little ahead. Yeah, I think all we can do is just do our part in making sure your paperworks are in order and submitted on time, and just see what happens.
But I guess what's concerning is if you started a project and you were in the middle of a project and funds ran out, what would that do? As opposed
From
to,
what I heard from Ross, he said that you might not be reimbursed quite as
right.
quickly as you had before.
I know, it's like,
Anyone else?
Okay, Stephanie, thank you, I guess, if there's no more questions. Mr. Kelly, you're going to talk to us about item 4. ABAG and Metropolitan Transportation Commission requests for local land use data.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I'm bringing this item for you. It's based on a request to the CMAs from ABAG and MTC as they're gearing up for the 2017 Regional Transportation Plan. They are looking to establish a baseline for their land use that they'll be using in the modeling and other analysis of the RTP. And what they're really looking for is any changes that have occurred between their previous base year, which was 2010, and their new base year, which is 2015. And so we have a modeling working group that's run by MTC and ABAG, and they asked us to go out to our partners. They asked us if they'd prefer they go to you guys directly, or if it would be easier if they used the CMAs as a middleman, and we said, since we already have these groups in place, that we would go out directly to the jurisdictions. But basically, they're not asking anyone to create any new data sets, anything like that. But if you have existing data on developments that have occurred since 2010, if you keep a development log or have a shape file or have any sort of database that has this information, and we're basically looking at land use, housing and commercial development, that you provide that to them. And so there's an attachment here that describes what they're looking for, a list of buildings, large projects, and information about those projects, the building type, the number of units, square footage, if it's still in process, the entitlement status and completion year, any updates to your general plans or zoning for your cities, changes in urban growth boundaries. I've actually already provided that to them. But a lot of this data we don't have on hand. And then halfway down the attachment, it has instructions for getting this data directly to them. But in the board letter, the staff report, we're asking that you instead send it to us first, and then, because we'd like to use that as well probably for our next model update, which will happen in the next year or two once the RTP land use information is released. So, we'll be able to use that to check against what MTC actually publishes. So if any of you do have, check with your planners, your whatever department maintains this information. And if you've got something readily available, I'd say just send it to me at the Hightail address you see in the staff report, and I'll pass it on to MTC and ABAG. If you don't have it, it's totally fine, but it's going to help everyone if you do. It's going to make, their analysis of Contra Costa and even, smaller geographies a little more accurate if they have that data. Otherwise, they're going to kind of assume or interpolate or do whatever they do to build upon their base year to establish a new base year. So I don't have a lot to say other than if your GIS department or planning department has this type of information, go ahead and send it on over, and we'll make sure it gets incorporated into the plan and any future work that we do here at CCTA. So that's really all I have, and I'll probably send this out to the RTPCs just so more people get to see it. Does anybody have any questions? Tom?
If we just sent you the number of building permits that we distributed per year, is that adequate?
I don't know, does building permits have like expected completion date associated with it?
Well, from 10, 11, 12, 13, we can probably get there. I'm just looking at this. This could be very, very complicated. It could be very easy. So I immediately went to the easy end.
Yeah. Well, I think they're not going to turn anything down. So I think I think it's better than nothing. It's going to give them, especially for communities like yours where they might not be planning, the level of growth that you guys are actually seeing on the ground. So it might be very helpful.
Am I correct that there's some sort of a planning director group that
There's
works
also a
with
planning
CCT?
director, so
you've made
probably
this
take it
request
to
to them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't yet. We haven't had a meeting since, but we'll take it to the next one. That's good idea.
Matt, 2 questions.
Yep.
Deadline?
They've left this open. This is kind of something they're working on through the end of the year, and they didn't give us a deadline. So I'd say anytime in the next 3 to 4 months, if you can pull this data up.
Okay.
Like I said, we're not asking you to create anything new, and they're not asking for that either.
Yeah, totally understand. So the second question is at what stage of development? So if we received an application, let's say in 2010, or the projects have been entitled, but yet have not started construction, and they were entitled during this 5-year period, is that acceptable to be able to provide that?
They have a whole land use department over there, so I think they would find a way to work with that. For our modeling needs here at CCTA, I'd be more interested in what's actually been built, but I'm sure they'd be willing to work with whatever you could provide them.
Okay.
No further questions? Well, Mr. Kelly, I'd say thank you, except I believe you're up for number 5, too.
I believe
about
I am.
The draft CMP.
Another exciting item here. So let me get on the same page as you guys. So we're here once again every 2 years to release the administrative draft of the 2015 Congestion Management Plan, or the CMP. I came to you back in April with kind of our proposed process for updating the CMP, and we've gone and done that. It's an administrative draft in that it will be circulated kind of internally. That means to our partner agencies and especially the RTPCs for comment, and then we incorporate those comments, send it to MTC. They review it for kind of overall consistency and make sure that all the required items are addressed. We get their comments back, incorporate that, and that becomes our final. So that's what will happen. Basically, we're going to distribute it for review and comment to the RTPCs. Any comments that are received, or any comments should come back to us by October 9th. I think that's the date I included in here. October 9th. And then we'll incorporate those and forward them on by the end of that month to MTC. But I'll just go over real quickly what we did. We, let's see, incorporated our new level of service methodology into the write-up, and we've also included that in our monitoring. So as most of you know, we did some intersection monitoring over the last month or two. We'll be bringing the results of that to you in September. That's being calculated right now. It'll be done over the summer. I don't think we may be able to get it to you by August, but it'll probably be September. And so far we don't, Jeremy had asked about intersections that were potentially deficient last time. And what I had our monitoring staff do is anything that was kind of one step away from being deficient last time, I had them analyze first. And none of those came up as deficient this time. So hopefully we won't have any that'll drop like 2 or 3 steps down to below their standard. But so far anything that was kind of close to dropping below its standard, maintained its standard. And those were mainly intersections in Walnut Creek and Concord. So those all came out looking good. If level of service E is good, they came out looking good. So like I said, I'll bring that to you in a couple of months. We updated the performance measures section, which is chapter 3, with new MTSOs from the action plan updates. We got some new kind of performance measures from the CSMPs, the Smart Mobility framework that was used in the 680 CSMP. We've incorporated that. What will be, I think, as part of the, during the admin's draft circulation, we'll update the document with the performance measures now being used in the CTP/TEP update. Those are kind of new, so we didn't have a chance to add those. We updated the list of PDAs, priority conservation areas, anything new from the OBAG and PDA investment strategy. We are documenting any changes to the model. We have documented changes to the model. And the big update that we always do is the capital improvement program, the 7-year list of projects that are going to be seeking funding. It's really most all of the projects, but we put them all in there just in case any of them kind of move forward in the next 7 years. So I'd ask you primarily to focus on that list and provide us any anything we're missing. As long as the project's in there, it's okay. If the cost is off, you're okay as long as it's in there, but feel free to provide us any updates on cost or status or anything like that. But the main thing is that the project is in there. It's that project list isn't in the agenda packet. It's on the website for download, as well as the full CMP document. Right now, you've just got the executive summary in your agenda packet. What we did for the CIP is take all the updates we received over the last year as part of the CTP and any other calls for projects that we did. If anything comes out of the current calls for projects for the RTP, the TEP, and the, what's the third one, Brad? Call for projects we're doing right now? STIP. Anything that comes out of that, any new projects, we'll make sure to add. But I'm not anticipating any new projects, but feel free to let me know if there are. And the other thing we did and that I worked with the transit providers with was to update their performance measures and and update their bus replacement schedule. I did hear from 2 of our 5 transit providers. Thank you to our chair who responded promptly. The other 3, left as is in the document. So you'll notice for BART, Westcat was good. BART, County Connection, and AC Transit didn't give us any updates, so those sections kind of remain as is. So we'd like to get some information from there. I won't target anybody who's here because they weren't the people I contacted. So I'll be bugging the people I contacted again during the circulation of the admin draft to get that updated, and I'll also get to bug them at the RTPC meetings. So that's about it. It's, the CMP, we primarily do a, kind of a technical update, just focusing on things that have changed since the last one, and that was in 2013. We already had an adopted RTP at that time, and a lot of the work on the CMP is making sure it's in alignment with the currently adopted RTP. So we feel like that's done. And as I mentioned, each time, most of the requirements of the CMP we address in our growth management program. So really, it's just kind of an exercise to make sure we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's and gotten all your projects in the list. So it's out there. Actually, what we're asking from you is to authorize the release, the circulation to the RTPCs, or actually forward it to the planning committee and have them authorize the release and circulation to the RTPCs. So that's the direction we're asking for today, and I can take any questions you have.
On the report, it shows the project types under, chapter changes from 2013 CMP. And I guess I'm wondering, are these based on specific projects and then rolled up, or is it just categories of allocations?
You're looking at page 5-10?
Correct.
Yeah, that is the actual projects that are in the CIP listing, and we just combined the project types. There's a larger listing with all the project types listed out in the actual staff report. I think there's 13 categories total. So yeah, that is the actual cost of the projects as provided by the sponsors. Funding amounts is much smaller.
Right, okay. Second question, and we had brought this up at WICTAC, and that is, I see you're using levels of service, and yet it's CEQA. What's the trend in terms of BMTs?
Really, in this document, we just addressed the changes that are coming online due to the passage of SB 743, and we've noted that there is legislation out there that would affect this actual document. We don't know when that's Senate Bill 1050. That was just introduced in February, I believe, and so you're right, I've got it wrong in the staff report. 1098. 1050 is something totally different. So 1098 would affect the CMP and how we monitor, how we, our standards, how we, deal with deficiencies, how we deal with our land use transportation analysis. So there would be a lot of impacts to this document if 1098 passes. Right now with SB 743 passing, there's a disconnect. The state is saying use VMT, and they're also saying use level of service in this document. So right now there is that disconnect, and we've documented that disconnect and kind of said there may be changes by the next cycle. I doubt there will be any changes in place by 2017, but it'll at least be, if 1098 passes, there will be discussions, I think, by that point. But probably we wouldn't see any actual changes to CMP probably until 2019.
So is it possible that those projects on the table on page 5-10 would differ? Some of them would be eliminated and new ones would be
Right now, there's no real connection between the level of service, as part of the performance measures and in the monitoring and the projects in the CIP.
They don't need to demonstrate that so I would think the levels of service would be used to get something on the plan.
Really, the requirements for the CIP is that these are any projects seeking funding over the next 7 years.
Okay, thank you.
So, we see some issues with this document. That's why we, kind of do a procedural, kind of technical update, and we use the action plans as more of a driver for what projects, are moving forward in relation to the measures spelled out for the roadways affected by those projects.
Thank you.
No further questions? I think Matt's looking for us to approve taking this to planning, true?
Yep.
Do we have a motion to do so? Jerry?
Second.
I didn't catch who that was, so. Steve?
Second.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 6.
Thank you.
Mr. Beck.
Go for it or not?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I said, hey, we got a first and a second. What more do you need? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Brad.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm here to be, I guess, a scold. We've started doing a periodic monitoring report on programs 12 and 13, the Measure J Transportation for Livable Communities and Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Trail Facilities programs. We did one last November, and we did one now based on the status of projects through the end of the first quarter. That is March 31st of this year. Through those two programs, we programmed about $21.7 million, and we programmed them to 43 projects. One project dropped out, so it's 42 projects that we're monitoring. And with this report, we found that only 6 of the 42 projects were not delayed, that the remaining projects were delayed by an average of 23 months, almost 2 years on average. It means some projects are significantly more, and that's worse than the 18-month average that we identified in the October 2014 report. We've had most of the funding for the study and design phases of the projects appropriated, but only about 3/4 of the construction funding. So there's about 22% of the funding that's still to be appropriated. Not surprisingly, I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that the majority of the funding is going towards construction, because it takes more money to do, obviously. Sponsors have only invoiced for about 17% of the total funding. So that's, it's not very much, it's about $4 million. We're estimating that by the end of the year, we'll have received requests for all of the funding. And part of the reason why we've delayed the next call for projects is that we wanted to give sponsors a little more opportunity to get their projects developed. And it also gives us an opportunity to try to coordinate the call for projects for the Measure J money with the call for projects for the next OBAG or OBAG 2. They didn't go with next OBAG or no bag that I was suggesting, but still. You will be hearing more about the two calls for projects over the next 6 months or so. NPC has made some suggestions about, or some basic decisions about OBAG 2. Mainly, we're getting less money. It's going to be a 5-year cycle, starting be 18 through 18, 19, 20, 21, 20 through 22. Fiscal year 22, we're thinking we were just going to go out to fiscal year 19 with the Measure J funds, where we may consider going out so that the 2 cycles have the same funding period. The different funding programs all have different requirements. They go through they have different purposes. They'll have different criteria for selecting projects. But on the other hand, there may be some benefits for having a single call for projects, even though it goes on at the same time, and it might be easier on local jurisdictions through that process. But that's not really the subject of this monitoring report. Like I said, it's mainly that we're hoping that we could speed up the delivery of the projects so that the users of the transportation system in Contra Costa can get their benefits of the improvements. But we're finding that it's taking time to go through the process, and we will want to talk about that and readiness of projects as one of the criteria for selecting projects through the next call for projects. So that's the end of my report, and if there are any questions or comments or suggestions, I have my pen ready.
Go ahead.
Well, I just sort of have probably a stupid question, but because it's local funds, so it's not, tied to the Caltrans, E76 and all that, what do you consider appropriated versus, is it when the project is ready?
The way the terms we use are programmed is that the authority has approved a certain amount of funding for a project. So back in 2012, the authority approved the Measure J Program 12 and 13 programming plan, and it programmed the certain amounts of funding to these 42 projects. And then the projects would come in and request an appropriation of that funding, and then the authority would or would not approve a funding resolution. Once that's done, then the project sponsors can invoice against that amount. And it's 4 particular phases. It's broken out.
Right, so basically it's when it gets approved in that funding category, then that money is sort of set aside and sitting there waiting.
Yes.
And so you could see how there's quite a bit of delay, because sometimes those projects are just in an initial, this is dream list. Okay, now we got the money. Now we got to go out and do everything, right? All the design and right away.
Well, some of the money is set aside for design,
so
right-of-way project management, studies. I will say the studies are almost all done. There's one they're going to be requesting a repurposing of the funding for other projects. That is a study, but that's not going to be a study.
I guess this is a comment, but I was just trying to get after it. So it feels like it's that we're not spending the money fast enough, which is, kind of always the comments that we get from Caltrans and others and MTC and all that too, right? So is there maybe a way that it can be more categorized so that because these projects do take a lot of time to go through, maybe right-of-way acquisition or environmental, or, you know what I mean? So is there a way that it's not all lumped into one? Do you know what I'm saying? I guess I'm just trying to, I always feel like when things like this come out, it feels like, well, we're just sitting around eating bonbons and, nobody's working hard at trying to do project delivery. So I hate that message. So sorry that was an editorial, but I was trying to also think of ways that we could explain that, I guess.
Well, one of the things that we think we're seeing, we're not in the trenches usually on these projects. but some of it is that the projects get forwarded to us, that staff people have ideas on projects, but the staff that actually have to implement the projects aren't always involved in that process of making the application. So there end up being more differences between what was applied for and what actually could be built. That the cost for certain things were wildly underestimated, for example. That's one of the problems. I think that's one of the things we want to look for when we review projects next time, and to make sure that the projects are more ready, get the money first, and the projects are less ready, get money for the design first. And that's right now we've got all this money sitting around that hasn't been invoiced. It's great to collect interest on it, but we'd rather it be spent building things. And I think everyone here agrees that you like to get the projects built too.
Any further comments? I know Brad was looking for, if I understand him correctly, recommendations. I don't think we've solved his issue for him. So
No, this is more for informational, and just that we send it on to the planning committee for information.
I had one question about the delay in the months. Does this include when, let's say, for example, the El Cerrito project, the Ohlone Greenway wayfinding project? I don't think that money was appropriated until this fiscal year, but it's showing a delay of 27 months. So I'm not, how are you calculating that delay?
Well, what we did was we looked at what you, the you in the third person, you, said in your application when you wanted to build a project. That's one thing we would like to get realistic sense of what you think the real schedule for the project would be. If you said that you were going to deliver the project by the end of 2013 and you're going to deliver it at the end of 2015, then that's a delay of 24 months.
But like in our application, we thought, let's say, for example, on that project, if we had gotten the money for fiscal year 12-13, we would have moved forward with that project. But the money wasn't programmed until fiscal year 14-15. So, and that's when we asked for the appropriation. So maybe that's a disconnect too, because this isn't reflecting the programmed year versus what was in the application.
Yeah. I'll check on that.
So, Brad, I want to maybe respond. This is not directly related to this particular topic, but I want to respond to something that you said earlier about project readiness and how the authority may be looking at that in the future. Not all projects are created equal, so even though they all start at the same starting point, some projects are going to move through design, PS&E, and construction much faster than others. So if you're going to take a broad brush look at project readiness in terms of which phase they're starting at, I'm not sure that that's a fair assessment of the project's readiness. You can have an easy project starting at the beginning that is going to take 12 months to get through every single phase and get done. And you can have a complicated project that's already perhaps gone through some of the environmental and right-of-way stages, but still going to take 2 years to design and 3 years to construct. And I'm not sure that you're going to, based on what you said earlier, I'm not sure you're going to draw that difference and say that one project is more ready than the other.
No, not necessarily. One thing we've seen, I think, is that what people said in their applications hasn't matched what they've been able to do once they get the money. And what we want is, what we'd like to encourage is more realism in the application so that we can program the money when it's needed. And if a project can get the money earlier because it's more ready to use the money, then we program those projects earlier. And the projects that are going to have that long process of design, that they get their money later because they don't need it right away. I mean, when you look at a project, you have to look at whether it's a realistic project, whether the schedule is realistic, whether the sponsors have addressed some of the issues that they're going to have to overcome. But there's also the issue of the benefit that the project provides. That also has to be one of the criteria that you looked at, one of the criteria. But we are, it doesn't look good when we have projects that say they're going to be ready and in place in 1 year, and it's 2 years afterwards that it doesn't look good for us. It doesn't look good for the sponsors, so we want to try to figure out a way so we don't have to say that when we look at how well projects are being delivered.
Go ahead.
I just have a couple more comments. Just wondering, how some of these projects may have federal funding and how that kind of, in terms of developing realistic schedules, developing that, 6-month lead time that you need to give Caltrans to making sure that that's included in project schedules, and what will help us, plan for when the money is needed. And just I know that over the last few years, staffing levels has really affected our local agencies in terms of delivering projects. I'm sure in previous years we've been able to deliver projects in a more timely, but I know in El Cerrito that was one thing that affected our delivery of projects. It was just reduced staffing levels. Thanks.
That's true. I understand that we've seen it not just in El Cerrito and other jurisdictions as well. The staff level but when projects get applied for, it's pretty clear that some have gone through some process of design or conceptual design, or more than others have, and they've gone further along that way. And that you assume that since they've done that work, that they have a more realistic understanding of what the schedule would be. They're able to schedule things better, more realistically.
Brad, not that this helps, but I was going to comment. The same thing, we're hearing the same message in the transit world about federal and state funding and from other controlling agencies as well. And to your credit, you seem to have a better grasp of the difficulties on our side than some of these other places. I often am the liaison between the funding sources that we're using and the project. I'm not managing the project, somebody else within the agency is. And one of my rules is until there's an allocation, and Yvette kind of touched on this, until there's an allocation, they don't get to start. Because more than once, this has happened to me, they're out there expending funds, and they say, but you told me this was approved. It was programmed. Until I have a document I know that I can go draw the funds from, I don't want them doing that, because then you get into a whole bunch of other complications. So, but you do seem to have a grasp, because I won't tell you who it is, but I battle pretty regularly with some other agency about you've never worked in operations and you don't know what it's like where the rubber meets the road, do you? So.
Just to comment along appropriations, in the applications, are you asking for council action to demonstrate that monies have been set aside for matches?
We haven't required the resolution that MTC requires. MTC does require a resolution of local support for federal money. We haven't done that. I would say most of the projects, of the 42 projects, don't have federal money, but there clearly are some that do. One of Yvette's projects did. There's 2 projects in Richmond. Hercules has got federal money on their 2 projects. I'm sure there are some other ones, but those are the main ones that I remember. But most of them are local, either Measure J entirely or Measure J plus local, some local funding.
Have you got what you came for?
Yeah, and I will check on the programmed year versus the schedule as well that Yvette raised.
Okay, moving along. It looks like, Brad, you are going to talk to us about the 65% peer review for the Central Concord pedestrian and improvements.
Yes, thank you. We had held the 65% peer review in April, at the end of April. There were a peer review committee of Tafik Halaby from Richmond, Peter Foom from City of San Ramon, and Rick Cole from Cole Management Engineering. They reviewed the 65% design plans for the project. And in your packet, there's the letter from the committee recommending that the TCC approve the peer review, but for the 65%, the peer review committee did want to review the 90% plans as well, because they felt that there were some issues that they wanted to see specifically how the sponsor addressed them. The comments and responses are included in your packet as well. There are 4 pages of them. I should have printed them out in landscape. They're a little small. I apologize for that. There were some issues that came up. One of the issues is that the project had a significant amount of roadway rehabilitation. This is TLC funding, and it's meant to encourage bicycle pedestrian transit use, and roadway rehab isn't really intended to be funded through, through the program. Obviously, sometimes you have to do rehab while you're doing the project, but there was a significant amount of asphalt being paved on Willow Pass Road. And that's an issue that we had with the Northwest Walnut Creek project as well, where there was a lot of roadway rehab in addition to some of the sidewalk improvements that were being done sort of in conjunction with, but not really a part of the project. So that's something that we would like to focus the project on, the improvements that support the purposes of the program, and make that more clear when we do the next call for projects. So what we're asking for is that you recommend approval of the peer review comments and responses.
Do we have a motion?
I would move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, I'll take us to item 7.1. It's not on the agenda. Does anybody have any other comments or questions or suggestions for future items that they would like to see? Well, if not, we are adjourned until July 16th.